Millionaire in utter distress. His baby wouldn't stop crying at the hospital until a stranger intervened. What happens when the only peace a millionaire's baby can find is in the arms of a stranger? The entire maternity floor of Austin General Hospital seemed to hold its breath at that unspoken question. The cries of the 2-day-old baby had lasted 3 straight hours, raw and grating, echoing off fluorescent ceilings, seeping into the waiting room, where vinyl chairs were as cold as ice. The air reeked of disinfectant, new plastic dry paper, and stale coffee. Daniel Reed, usually the composed CEO, now stood by the crib with bloodshot eyes, his navy suit wrinkled like a folded map. His wife, Hope, had died of postpartum hemorrhage. Her last words had cut him like a double-edged blade. "Take care of our baby. Promise." He had promised. But that promise now slipped from his grasp like a rain-soaked rope. Dr. Aaron Martin spoke softly, trying to maintain his professional calm. "We've run every test, heart, lungs, reflexes. Everything is normal." Daniel fought a tremor. Then why won't he stop crying? Why can't I comfort him? Nurse Carol Jensen and her colleagues rotated in, holding rocking, swaddling burrito-style shifting positions, switching bottles, humming lullabies. All failed. The wailing shredded the air like sandpaper. At the end of the hallway, Aaliyah Carter, a black maid, carried a bag of breakfast tacos and a paper coffee cup on her way to visit Uncle Joe, laid up from a fall at a construction site. She was about to step into the elevator when the cries gripped her, as if an invisible hand had seized her wrist. 8 years ago, pneumonia had stolen her son Dylan in just 3 days. Since then, every newborn's cry pierced her like both scar and compass, and that compass told her this was not the cry of pain, but of lostness, a small soul searching for arms. For 20 minutes, Aaliyah stood in the hallway corner listening as one listens to truth. "Not your business. You're a stranger. This is the VIP ward." Then another voice, the one that survived Dylan's last day, answered, "If it were your child, you'd pray someone knocked." She stepped to the nurse's station. "I won't touch the baby without permission," she said clearly, slowly, in American English, her name tag taped to an old cardigan. Through the glass of the private room she saw it all. The man with stubbled chin and trembling hands, the crib quivering with broken breaths, the nurse patient but helpless. She knocked softly. Daniel turned. Before him was no doctor, no staff member, just a black woman in a cardigan, worn sneakers, and eyes that did not flinch. "This is a private room," he said, his voice stripped of command. "I know," Aaliyah nodded. "I've been listening outside. I lost a child once. Maybe what he needs isn't medicine, but arms." "Doctor?" Martin arrived, glanced at Nurse Carol. She gave a faint shrug, helpless yet open. "We've tried everything." Daniel stepped back half a pace as if making room for a miracle he barely dared to believe. Aaliyah scrubbed her hands, carefully pressed her palms against the cold steel sink, closed her eyes for a second. "Help me do right by this child. Has he been given a name?" she asked softly. Daniel swallowed hard. Not yet. Hope wanted to meet him first. Aaliyah bent down, slid her hands under the swaddle, lifted the baby's fragile neck, and drew him into the hollow of her chest, where a mother's heart once fell silent in loss. She rocked gently like an elevator gliding between dim floors. A hushed gospel rose from her throat, not for performance, just enough for one small listener. "Hey there, little one. You're safe. You're held." The room's sound changed. The crying faltered, stumbled, tried to rise again, then fell quiet, as if caught in its own shame. Within minutes, the baby's breath lengthened, steadied, warmed, like a lake returning the moon's reflection. His thin eyelids fluttered once, then closed. Daniel pressed both hands to his mouth. Nurse Carol exhaled a breath she hadn't released all day. How? "How did you do that?" Daniel whispered, afraid his voice would shatter the fragile peace. "Love has a temperature," Aaliyah replied, eyes fixed on the baby's face. "Babies know when it's warm." She adjusted the blanket, her hand brushing the infant's left shoulder, and froze a tiny crescent-shaped birthmark curved exactly as her memory could trace in the dark. Just coincidence. She swallowed the sting in her nose, pressed 2 fingers to her lips, then lifted them gently into the air, a habit unbroken since Dylan left. "Hi, son." Dr. Martin returned with his stethoscope, pressed it lightly to the infant's chest. "Vitals are perfect." He shook his head, almost smiling after a day strung tight as wire. "I've never seen a turnaround this fast from nothing but arms." Daniel looked at Aaliyah as one looks at an unexpected life raft beside a sinking boat. If you can please stay at least tonight. I don't know how long I can manage alone." Aaliyah held the baby closer, listening to his heartbeat drum against her sternum, 2 rhythms finding each other. In the corner, the green exit sign painted a stripe across the white floor. Inside her arms was peace. Beyond them, a very long night awaited. Letting an outsider hold a baby in a VIP ward could never rest on sentiment alone. Early afternoon, the small conference room beside the nurses' station glowed with amber light. Dr. Aaron Martin, Nurse Carol, the hospital lawyer, the evening shift security guard Daniel, and Aaliyah perched on the edge of her chair. Fingers tightly entwined formed a circle. Beyond the glass panel, the hallway stretched on with the drone of suction machines, carts rolling, and voices calling names. The lawyer opened voice flat and cold as the tabletop. "We need to establish responsibility, Miss Carter. You are not medical staff. You are not permitted to perform clinical interventions. Your role is limited strictly to family support." Nurse Carol cut in gently, eyes marked by years of weary mothers, and we witnessed the baby's state change in 5 minutes. No drugs, no procedures. Dr. Martin crossed his arms. "Medicine acknowledges both regulation and human touch, but everything must be documented." Daniel straightened. Breaking his own hesitation, "I'll take responsibility. She is my family's support person." Aaliyah stared at the consent form lines of print and empty boxes. She read slowly, stopping at relationship to patient. The pen trembled once before she wrote, "Support person." Nurse Carol slid another ink pen toward her smiling sign, "When you're ready, no one's forcing you." As the words blurred like a flood memory, pulled Aaliyah back to that ER years ago. Dylan wheezing under white lights, the monitor's beep, beep, tapping her knees like a woodpecker. Doctors explaining everything correctly. No one left to lean on. Now, in this small conference room, a man was caught between a wife's death and a baby's cries, and an infant had just found calm in her arms. She signed. The stroke was bold final. Later, when Aaliyah walked the baby through the corridor for fresh air, the evening shift security guard knew unbriefed blocked her VIP ward. Badge. His gaze lingered, part suspicion, part reflex on her brown skin and old cardigan. Aaliyah stopped the baby pressed to her chest. She answered calmly, "I'm the family support person." From the far end, Daniel appeared. "She's with me." Dr. Martin raised his hand. "She's cleared." The moment passed, but the crease it left in Aaliyah's mind was thin, and sharp class and colors still set invisible checkpoints. As dusk fell, the hospital light softened like someone dimmed a switch. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhausted beyond knowing his exhaustion. Aaliyah rocked the baby in an armchair, patting gently, while humming, "You Are My Sunshine," her American English soft as flannel. "Thank you," Daniel said, voice like one who had run through hail. I don't know where I'd collapse tonight if not for you." Aaliyah met his eyes, firm, not sentimental. you've been here all along. You're keeping your promise to hope the way you can by showing up." The words struck where Daniel had no name for, and he turned aside, inhaling like a man pulling an arrow from his chest. When the nurse entered for the newborn's first vaccine, she asked, "Who's holding him?" Daniel instinctively looked at Elia. She nodded, adjusted her hold. The needle pricked skin, the baby jerked. Elia pressed her lips close to his ear. "It's okay, little brave one." The cry shrank into a whimper, then faded. Nurse Carol looked at the pair, a man with a towering financial legacy, a black maid with loss carved into her bones, and saw what medicine once called by its old name, attachment. Late at night, Dr. Martin set the file on the table. "The baby's fine. If nothing unusual tonight, he can be discharged in the morning." He looked at Daniel. "Home will be harder. Empty houses don't know how to soothe. You'll need someone." Daniel turned to Elia. "If you're willing, come home with me and the baby. Stay a few weeks. I'll pay. Fairly, give you your own room. The choice is yours." The room grew so still they could hear the hum of the AC breathe. Elia knew too well the risks in that offer, the blurred lines of labor and kinship, the traps of dependence, the stares already waiting on every corner. She also knew its chance, a baby who had found the warmth he needed, a father just learning to lower his voice in the face of love. "I'm poor in letters," Elia said honestly. "I don't have shiny certificates. All I have are hands and a heart." "Those are the two things I can't buy," Daniel answered without a hint of jest. Elia stepped out to make a call. Uncle Joe picked up the voice, gravelly girl. "I might not come home tonight. There's a baby and a father. They need me, and I need them too." Silence held a beat. Then a tired but warm chuckle. "Go do your thing, kid." The next morning, discharge papers in hand, they rolled the bassinet through the automatic doors. The Texas sun slammed down hot and white. In the parking lot, heat shimmered off asphalt like a mirage. Matthew, the name chosen in the night, drew in a breath. Eyes wide like tiny windows outside, was noisy but vast. Alia pulled the stroller shade a little lower, whispering in American English like a newly written vow. "Let's go home." They left Austin General, each pushing half of the same bassinet. Ahead lay the slope of Westlake Hills, a house with more glass than walls, a kitchen still smelling only of lemon oil, and many long nights. But inside the bassinet was a breath at peace, and beside it 2 people who had agreed to choose each other at least for today. And sometimes today alone is enough to open a new life. The West Lake Hills gate opened the road curling uphill beneath oaks that cast dappled shadows across the car. Daniel's house appeared more glass than wall planes that reflected everything except warmth. The stone floor in the foyer gleamed as if wet, scented with lemon oil, the air conditioning set cool enough that the paintings on the walls had no clue what season it was. The nursery upstairs looked straight out of a catalog, white crib, white curtains, ash-gray rug, beautiful, expensive, and too spotless to touch. Just before leaving the hospital, as dawn poured milk-white light through the hallway glass, there had been a moment Alia remembered like a prayer answered. Daniel stood by the crib with its glimmering empty IV line, gazing down at the baby, sleeping quietly in her arms. His voice was rough from sleepless nights. "My wife once scribbled some names on the back of a grocery receipt. Matthew, if it was a boy, Hope, if it was a girl. But I feel like I'd be betraying her if I decided alone when she promised she'd do it." Alia lifted the baby onto her shoulder, pressed her cheek against the damp fuzz of his hair. "You're not betraying her. You're carrying both your parts." She set the intention, the one who remains names through acts of love. Daniel was silent for a long time. Then, like laying the first stone of a bridge, he said, "You choose." Aaliyah looked at the peaceful face at the faint crescent-shaped birthmark like a tiny moon on his left shoulder and whispered, "Matthew. Matthew Reed." Daniel repeated it twice, each time tying the name tighter. Matthew. Matthew Reed. Now, in the cold white nursery, Aaliyah set a white noise monitor in the corner, pulled the blackout shade halfway down, took from her cloth bag a worn fox plush, and the swaddle she knew by instinct not too tight to restrict breath, not too loose to let the startle reflex spin the child into new circles of fear. Daniel stood in the doorway watching her arrange low-cost items with precise care. Need me to order anything he asked by reflex of a man who could buy nearly everything. What I need isn't sold in stores, Aaliyah smiled, taping a small note on the cabinet. Sleep signals, rubbing eyes, yawning, staring off. Cycle 333. She wrote it in marker letters, sharp and clear, as if to inscribe a new language into this house. In the afternoon, she strung lights across the back porch. The HOA here hates year-round lights, Daniel said, half joking, half embarrassed. Kids love sparkles, Aaliyah shrugged. And houses, if they want to live, need to sparkle too. She carried Matthew out, letting him sunbathe 10 minutes with a cotton hat and a thin coat of sunscreen, then stepped back inside to light the gas stove. Shallots hit butter flour fell like light snow. Chicken and dumplings bubbled. Green beans winked in oil. Cornbread rose golden in the oven. Within an hour, the house, once knowing no scent but cleansers, breathed for the first time in its own aroma. Daniel leaned in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't meant to cry, but the smell of butter and flour, the sound of "You Are My Sunshine," hummed just low enough for the kitchen and warm enough to reach the living room, made the elbows of his suit jacket, once his armor, feel unnecessary. This kitchen, since Hope died, it hasn't smelled like anything, he murmured as if writing a note to himself. The kitchen is the heart of a home, Aaliyah replied, stirring with her right hand and holding Matthew on her left hip. When the heart is warm, the house is warm. Night came. For the first time in days, Daniel lay down on a mattress, but sleep didn't arrive like a door flung open. It picked the lock slowly. At 3 a.m., Aaliyah heard another cry, not Matthew's. She knocked lightly on Daniel's door. "I'm fine," he said through the wood, the standard reply of the not fine. "May I come in?" "Speaking it makes it lighter," she answered. His room was neat to the point of emptiness. On the desk sat Hope's photo in green scrubs, RN badge shining. Her smile so bright that if one didn't know the ending, one could believe tragedy was fiction. Daniel sat on the bed's edge, rubbing his hands as if trying to spark a flame. He told her how Hope slowed him down, chose calming blue for the nursery, made him test the rocking chair until he dozed off in front of her. How naming alone felt like tearing away from his promise to let her decide. Aaliyah listened, didn't interrupt, then offered a single line, "You're not alone. The name doesn't take Hope away. It carries her every time you call your son." They pulled up a photo of the crumpled receipt, her messy ballpoint handwriting. Daniel's hands shook as he zoomed in on the names Matthew and Hope, as if touching an ordinary supermarket afternoon, an ordinariness now worth silver. "If one day there's a girl, let's use Hope, shall we?" Aaliyah whispered. Daniel's eyes welled not only from grief, but because a door he thought locked had quietly opened. Matthew slept 2 stretches that first night home, short but steady like ripples on water. Aaliyah stood outside the nursery, listening to the white noise under his breathing, knowing every miracle is woven from small repeated acts. In the next room, Daniel's breathing slowed. Aaliyah pulled out the fox plush, tucked it back in. She always did that, no grand reason, only because once long ago someone had tucked a toy beside Dylan in a darker room. Near dawn, Daniel brewed coffee, reading the notes Aaliyah had taped on the fridge sleep schedule, 7 to 10, 1, and 4. Sunlight, 10-minute 8, 30 a.m. Laundry soap unscented. At the bottom, she had written small fatherhood shikkork presents. He smiled, not the smile of someone who knew everything, but of someone daring to start from the beginning. As the sun climbed over the oaks, the glass house remained a glass house, but inside it a warm rhythm had begun. And for Aaliyah, that was enough to step into the next day. The next morning, Aaliyah rolled the stroller onto the front porch to give Matthew his early sunbath. She spread a thin cloth hung a small plastic pinwheel to let the breeze peel away some of the silence from the facade. Ms. Whitaker, the longtime housekeeper, stepped out. Starched blouse, tiny bow tie, eyes precise as a level. Miss Carter, she said the house rules don't allow baby items on the front porch. It looks not appropriate for the neighborhood. The word inappropriate fell like a paper knife, no blood, but enough to scrape skin. Morning sunlight helps set an infant's biological clock, Aaliyah replied evenly. Just 10 minutes with hat and sunscreen. Even so, Ms. Whitaker pressed gently, "This is Mr. Reed's home. And it's also Matthew's home," Aaliyah answered, voice no louder, but clearer. Daniel appeared on the steps, having heard the exchange. He understood Whitaker was the house's habit, crisp, polished, traceless. He also knew if he didn't choose now, he'd keep avoiding. "From today on, anything Matthew needs is appropriate," Daniel said simply. Whitaker paused a beat, and in that beat, she saw a different man standing there. She nodded, turned back inside, leaving the door open as if a small concession to sunlight. By late morning, Mr. Collins, the neighbor 2 doors down, tan like a man who loved his long drives, brought a basket of flowers to congratulate the baby. His eyes skimmed the stroller, paused on Aaliyah, then returned to Daniel. "Have you hired an agency yet?" "Around West Lake, the standard is a certified nanny." He smiled, like sharing a trade secret. Daniel glanced at Aaliyah, a silent question. She gave the faintest shrug. Daniel turned back. "The standard in my home is a baby who sleeps well, eats well, smiles often. The one meeting that standard is standing right here." Collins raised his brows, mumbled, then retreated into safe small talk about property values. That afternoon, Aaliyah took Matthew to the nearby grocery. At checkout, she swaddled him, held him close, rocking gently while pulling the cart. The cashier grinned. "Your baby is adorable." The woman in line behind, curious but harmless, asked, "Do you babysit part-time?" Aaliyah smiled. "I take care of him. No additions, no labels, nanny mother or otherwise. Some answers are enough as they are, and she chose precisely that length." Back home, Matthew's forehead felt unusually warm. Aaliyah checked 37.8 on the edge between normal and mild fever. To Daniel, those numbers fell like a sudden heavy rain. The old fear surged back, 2 days hemorrhage. ER lights blazing, his hand shook, opening the medicine cabinet. Aaliyah touched his hand. "Look at me, Daniel. We'll take it step by step." She pointed to the protocol taped on the fridge monitor every 30 minutes. Small sips of electrolyte lukewarm wipe down, call the doctor if thresholds crossed or red flags appeared, lethargy labored, breathing, dry diapers. You log the time and temp. I'll handle the rest. Daniel held the pen like an anchor rope, something tangible against invisible panic. Outside, Texas clouds gathered like curtains drawn. Thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, Aaliyah held Matthew against her shoulder, patting in rhythm, 1, 2, 3, humming a fragment of wordless gospel. After an hour, the fever dropped to 37.4. Daniel exhaled as if he had swum through a whirlpool. "I hate the feeling of losing control," he admitted. "Control is often an illusion," Aaliyah said, wiping the baby's sweat. Presence is real. And today you're here. That evening, as rain truly fell, Daniel's phone buzzed nonstop. New York partners critical. If you don't fly tonight, the deal could collapse. Daniel looked at the chart on the fridge. 5:30 p.m. 37.6, 6 Euro p.m. 37.4, 6:30 p.m. 37.5. He looked at his son breathing evenly on Alia's chest. Some decisions measured by ROI yield poor numbers, but measured by who will remember they add up differently. He answered, "Not tonight. I'll join online in the morning, then decide." Silence on the other end for 3 seconds, the pause of potential loss, then a curt reply, "Your call." The storm eased, the house steadied. Miss Whitaker appeared in the kitchen doorway cardigan now, instead of bow tie holding a warm towel fresh from the dryer. "Let me help, just a quick wipe on the baby's neck." Aaliyah nodded. The two women, one who had bound the house in rules of Polish, one who brought habits of tenderness, stood side by side in wordless truce. "I apologize for this morning," Whitaker whispered. "I was used to a house without traces, but maybe traces are what make a home." Aaliyah smiled. "Leave the toys on the porch. I'll clear them before night." "Deal." Whitaker nodded, eyes both older and younger at once. That night, Matthew slept 4 straight hours, a new record. Daniel stood at the nursery door barely breathing, afraid to ripple the surface of such stillness. Aaliyah stood beside him, whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll hang some wind chimes in the garden for Matthew. HOA will send us warning letters." Daniel chuckled softly. "Then we'll take them down when we must." But tonight, let him hear, Aaliyah replied. In the living room, light pooled across the big glass pane. Outside were the rules that could be written into a neighborhood charter. Inside were the unwritten rules of a house learning to breathe writing instead of panicking presence, instead of proving lullabies instead of arguments. On Matthew's left shoulder, the crescent birthmark lay quiet like an open parenthesis, unclosed, maybe never needing to close, so that everything unfolding had a place to enter. Daniel looked at it then, at the woman who had stilled his child in 5 minutes and steadied him in another life. He spoke so softly it seemed meant for the house itself. "Thank you for being here." Aaliyah only nodded. Some words, when right, don't need length. Some presences, when enough, don't need definition. The invitations were printed on brown craft paper, handwritten by Aaliyah with a marker, "Happy 1st, Matthew Backyard, BBQ 2 p.m. The guest list was simple. Nurse Carol, Dr. Aaron Martin, Uncle Joe, a few of Daniel's decent colleagues from the firm, the Collins couple from next door, and some neighbors who always smiled when the stroller rolled by. At first, Miss Whitaker frowned. Backyard parties. The HOA will make a fuss, but she was the one who eventually unlocked the storage, pulled out extra folding tables and tablecloths, and advised put the napkins on the left end of the table, it's easier. Austin, noon blazed like poured fire. The string lights hung weeks earlier winked under the oaks. Aaliyah tied balloons to the fence, taped up a hand-painted banner. Happy 1st, Matthew. The letters, a little crooked, a little blue. The grill roared. The smell of sizzling meat drifted across the yard, tangled with buttered corn and mesquite smoke. Daniel, normally the CEO in ties, wore a striped apron, tongs in hand, and now and then scooped Matthew up so Aaliyah could carry out trays of mac and cheese and cornbread fresh from the oven. "Did you hire an event service?" Mr. Collins asked, condensation dripping from his cold beer can. Around Westlake, birthdays are supposed to have the works, photographer's balloon, arches, tiered cakes. The standard here today, Daniel replied, not sharp but concise, is friends eating and kids laughing. Aaliyah heard it, and her mouth curved into an irrepressible smile. Guests trickled in. Nurse Carol brought a small cloth book that crackled. Dr. Martin joked. A doctor's gift is just a wish. Long naps, hearty, appetite, few fevers. I'll take it all. Aaliyah laughed. Midway through, a van stopped at the gate. A woman in a suit stepped out, handed Daniel a card, Samantha Ross, Premium Nanny Agency. I heard you are in a transitional caregiver arrangement, she said, flicking a glance at Aaliyah before turning back. Our agency offers nationally certified night nurses advanced CPR spotless records. At your level, you should go premium. The air dipped. Daniel hadn't replied when Nurse Carol smirked. Which certification teaches warm arms? Which one teaches how to read the signal before a cry? Aaliyah said nothing, crouched to retie Matthew's shoelace, adjusting his little sun hat. Daniel took the card, looked straight. Thank you. My home already has someone premium. You're taking a risk, Samantha warned, half scolding, half threatening. At this tier, everything should be by the book. The rulebook here is my son's piece, Daniel answered, and she's the rulebook of this house. Samantha pressed her lips, muttered, Your choice, and left. Aaliyah glanced up, met Nurse Carol's eyes sparkling with gentle solidarity. They both exhaled a tiny laugh like a stuck door finally pushed open. At 2:30, the cake came out, single-tier white frosting sprinkles scattered. Daniel carried Matthew to the table. Everyone counted 1, 2, 3. The candle went out. Applause burst. Matthew, still wobbly on his feet, suddenly toddled 2 short steps into Daniel's arms, babbling, Dada. Cheers erupted across the yard. Aaliyah set her tray down, tears welling fast and warm. Then, like sprung by a coil, Matthew turned, stretched his arms toward Aaliyah, pressed frosting-smudged cheek to her neck, and rang out clear as a bell, Mama. The yard froze a second only, oak leaves whispering overhead. Dr. Martin looked at Nurse Carol. Ms. Whitaker pressed her hand to her chest. Daniel nodded slowly, as if signing for a truth long waiting to be spoken. Aaliyah held tight her heart, stumbling in fright and joy. She hadn't taught him the word, hadn't asked for it. It had ripened on its own, falling to the arms stretched wide. Mama, Matthew repeated softer this time, then burst into giggles, tugging at the thin silver chain around her neck. The joy hit its peak just as a scare struck a crumb of cornbread caught the wrong way. Matthew stiffened, choking eyes widening. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted, Call 911. Aaliyah turned him sideways, head slightly lower than chest. Firm back pats measured. It's okay, little man, I'm here, she said steadily. The crumb popped free. Matthew gasped deep, then wailed. The yard exhaled relief. Dr. Martin gave a thumbs up. Daniel gripped Aaliyah in a brief, fierce hug. Daniel's phone buzzed furiously. His CFO New York clients are in the office ready to sign. If you're not here in an hour, they'll walk. Daniel looked at his son, safe again, on Aaliyah's shoulder, at friends circled close at the lingering butter scent of grilled corn. He called back. We'll move to Monday. Today I'm home. Silence on the line. Are you sure? Sure. He hung up, setting the phone down its glass surface, reflecting a man unrecognizable from the one in the hospital. By late afternoon, the crowd thinned. Miss Whitaker folded tablecloths, quietly told Aaliyah. This morning, I have supported the agency for the sake of the proper way. But thinking again, proper doesn't always mean right for home. Aaliyah smiled. You just said exactly what I needed tonight. 2 women, 2 classes, 2 generations touched hands over the sink as if sealing a pact. The sun slipped. String lights blinked on, reflected in Matthew's drowsy eyes. Daniel carried him Aaliyah, walking beside across the still warm grass. On Matthew's left shoulder, the crescent birthmark glimmered like an open parenthesis. Not closed, never needing to close. Simply there, reminding that love in this house was named not by bloodline, but by who carried, who soothed, who stayed. Before closing the door, Daniel whispered his new habit, "Thank you for being here." Tomorrow, Aaliyah answered, "We'll tape up a storytime schedule." Daniel nodded. He had learned to measure happiness in small repeated acts. Austin's season turned sudden dry, wind-low clouds a storm black as spilled ink. At 9:47 p.m., the power line at the end of the street popped, and the whole neighborhood went dark. Baby monitor off, white noise off. The glass house became a black box. Matthew startled awake, crying with his whole chest. Daniel flailed in the darkness, hands groping like searching for an invisible door. Aaliyah snapped into the mode she'd trained herself for. Phone, flashlight clenched between her teeth, one arm lifting Matthew from the crib, the other pulling the go bag she'd packed. Diapers, wipes, thin blanket, small flashlight thermometer, electrolyte, water, fingertip, pulse, oximeter. Deep breath. "Daniel," she said, voice anchoring him. "Open the window, I'll handle this round." The nursery was stifling the AC dead. Aaliyah peeled off a layer of Matthew's clothes, wiped his neck with a warm cloth. His cries shifted to a steady wail. She opened a white noise app, set it to rain. She propped the flashlight in a glass, turning it into a lantern. "It's okay, little one. Mama's got you." Her pats landed in rhythm, 1, 2 to 3, her gut dropping into the exact frequency needed. 10:13, his cries surged again, harsher wheezing. Aaliyah lifted him at a 30-degree angle, checked tongue and back no mucus but nose clogged. "Nasal saline," she said. Daniel was already at the door with the drops and bulb syringe. "You hold the light. I'll drop suction quick." Saline and suction. Matthew screamed, then breathed clearer. Daniel exhaled loud as rain on a roof. 11:02, the lights flicked back. The house glowed alive. Daniel hugged Aaliyah before remembering boundaries, employer, employee, and released. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She handed him a small card, "Infant First Aid 3 Steps." "Tape this by the monitor. Read it every night. Once you know it by heart, you'll fear less." Daniel held it like a new passport. "I want to learn right, not just rely on you." Next morning, the HOA emailed string lights, wine chimes, toys on porch violation of Section 4.2. Remove within 48 hours. Ms. Whitaker printed it, left it on the kitchen table with a post-it. "Want me to reply for you?" Daniel looked at the paper, then at Matthew crawling on the colorful Matt Fox plush in hand. "I'll reply," he said, opening his laptop. "Dear Board, we have a small child. Lights are for nighttime safety. Wind chimes guide us when the power fails. He sleeps to the sound of rain. Toys will be cleared nightly by 8 p.m. This is a family, not a showroom. Respectfully." He hit send for the first time, hearing his household's voice in an official letter. By noon, Daniel laid a stack of papers on the table. "Contract," he said. Aaliyah stiffened the word. Contract carried echoes of past imbalance. Daniel spoke slowly, reading line by line, clear salary, defined breaks, health insurance, right to refuse, if boundaries crossed private room, and a training clause he would enroll in infant CPR choking, first aid, basic nutrition. "I'll sign first," Daniel said, putting pen down. "This isn't binding you, it's my commitment to Matthew and to you." Aaliyah read carefully, then looked up. "Is there a clause for tuition reimbursement if I want a nanny certificate?" "Yes," Daniel nodded. "If you want the diploma, I'll pay. If you don't, I won't push." "And a cultural respect clause?" she asked, half joking, half serious. "It's in. Juneteenth off. Gospel music doesn't count as noise." Daniel smiled. After signing, Aaliyah paused. She thought of the woman in the suit yesterday, of all the times she'd been asked, "Are you nanny or mother?" of the guard's suspicious eyes at the hospital hallway. This paper didn't erase history, but it built a bridge from vague gratitude to written respect. "All right," she said. "Let's do it right from the start." That afternoon the air softened. Aaliyah carried Matthew to the backyard, hung another small wind chime. Daniel followed with scissors. "If the HOA cracks down, we'll take it down. But today, let him hear the wind," Aaliyah finished. At sunset, Uncle Joe pulled up hauling an old toolbox. "Install a mini generator. Heard the whole block went dark last night." Daniel opened the lid, learned to pull the cord, pour oil, flip the switch. Skills he'd never imagined needing now fit like a jacket the right size. Aaliyah watched Matthew in her arms, thinking, a man who knows how to light his own house, that's the finest promise. That night Matthew slept peacefully. Near midnight, Daniel stood at Aaliyah's doorway, knocked softly. "Tomorrow, I face the board. They'll ask why I delayed New York. I'll tell them. Something more important was at home. If they don't get it, I'll still get it." Aaliyah nodded, no teaching needed. She only said, "You understood back at the hospital. Tonight you gave it words." Before closing the door, Daniel pointed at the fridge chart Aaliyah had posted. "Tomorrow ad, Dad reads 8 p.m., right at it." Aaliyah grinned, and ad, Mama sings 8:10, and Family listens to the wind 8:20. Done, she nodded, like signing a second contract, no ink, just the habit of kindness. Outside, the wind chimes whispered. Inside, the crescent birthmark on Matthew's shoulder slept beneath soft fabric like a half-written poem. The three of them, each holding an end of the same rope, were learning to pull toward each other. And that was a survival skill no class could teach. But they were learning it night by night, breath by breath. The afternoon fell over the backyard like a warm cotton blanket. Aaliyah was hanging white muslin cloths on the line. Matthew, crawling after his fox plush across the grass, the breeze setting the wind chimes into a shimmer of metal notes. Suddenly, he stopped pointed toward the side gate, Grandpa. His little voice broke open like sunlight through leaves. There, beyond the fence, stood a man, old jacket, faded cap, worn shoes, clutching a dented toolbox. His eyes were wet. Aaliyah. His voice trembled like gravel rolling in a tin pipe. Daughter Aaliyah gripped the clothespin until her knuckles went white. She knew the voice before the face. Earl Carter, the man who left her life when she was 15, absent when her mother died, absent the day Dylan was diagnosed absent through those last 3 days. Rage and longing collided in her chest, 2 waves crashing head-on. Daniel stepped forward, standing level with her, not blocking, not behind, just beside. "What do you want?" he asked, voice steady with warmth and boundary. "I came for you," Earl said, pulling from his pocket a scratched plastic coin, an 18-month sober chip. "I've quit. I want to help. I walk this block every evening hoping to see you just for a moment." He inhaled through his mouth, exhaled through his nose, the kind of breathing taught to keep tears from breaking in public. Matthew, in Aaliyah's arms, looked past the fence and repeated, "Sure as truth, Grandpa." The word fell like a seed. No one stopped to judge the soil. It rooted itself. "If you want to come in, there are conditions," Daniel said, eyes still on Aaliyah, asking if she was all right. She nodded, pulled the words out like untangling threads. 1, show up on time. 2, ask for nothing except to be here. 3, respect this house's rhythm. Matthew's rhythm, mine. 4, Grandpa is a title you earn, not request. Earl nodded fast, gripping the toolbox handle like rope. "Let me do small things," he said. "Fix the squeaky hinge patch, the step read, 'Good night, Moon,' if the boy allows. And let me apologize at Dylan's grave when you're ready." Aaliyah didn't promise, but she didn't close the door either. Daniel unlatched the side gate, cracked it open a hand's width. "Start in the yard," he said, "inside later." The next day, 4:15 sharp, Earl arrived. He replaced the screen door, hinge oiled it, pulled out, Rusty nails tightened loose screws. The day after he planted marigolds along the edge, keeps mosquitoes off, and looks nice. Aaliyah watched those cracked, calloused hands, remembering afternoons he stacked bricks when she was little and nights he didn't come home because of drink. Both memories came together like shadow and light. The following week, Earl brought in a sanded wooden chair, set it beside the nursery rocker. I fixed the back support, he tapped the frame. So your spine won't ache when you hold him. Aaliyah sat no creak's solid support. Matthew crawled up, patted the seat with little hands giggling. Aaliyah caught Daniel's eye at the doorway, gratitude flickering unspoken. There were stumbles, too. The first time Earl held Matthew, the boy squirmed for Aaliyah. Earl set him down immediately, no pleading small, but Aaliyah marked it huge, respecting a child's signal. Another afternoon, a sudden Austin storm hit the playground. Dark gusts, thunder cracking. Earl didn't waste words, tucked Matthew against his chest, sprinted sideways against the wind, pressed both boy and fox plush into Aaliyah's arms under a shelter, then dashed back for the car through sheets of rain. 5 minutes later, the car pulled to the curb, everyone soaked but safe. In that moment, a piece of prejudice slid off Aaliyah's shoulders like a wet leaf. One evening, Aaliyah found an envelope Earl had left on the porch, a handwritten letter scrawled and breathless. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything. If staying hurts you, send me away. If staying lightens you, give me a chance. I don't ask for the past. I ask to be present. She didn't answer, but the next night she let him read a story. His voice was softer than she expected. Steady, no pretense, goodnight stars, goodnight air. Matthew lay across his knees until the very last page for the first time. And the day came when Aaliyah agreed to the cemetery. The sky was hard blue, the breeze soft as a hand. At Dylan Carter's stone, Earl pressed his cap to his chest, no circling. I wasn't there, I was drunk, I was weak. I asked to stand behind my daughter so when she stumbles she falls back without falling down. No hedges, no excuses. Aaliyah understood some apologies don't heal the past, but place a hand in the present where it belongs. She didn't hug, she just nodded, tired but true. In the weeks after Grandpa slowly shaped itself, a man who shut his phone off at 8 p.m. while reading who called 12 minutes ahead if traffic delayed him, who brought pencils and rulers to draw imaginary train tracks with Matthew, who fixed the stuck cabinet so Miss Whittaker no longer had to shoulder it open for towels. He didn't speak much about alcohol, didn't wash himself clean with words. He proved with habit. One night, Daniel handed Aaliyah a cup of tea. They sat on the porch watching Earl blow soap bubbles for Matthew to chase. You're lighter, Daniel said softly, because he came, or because you allowed yourself to be lighter? Both Aaliyah answered. To be here is the hardest verb my father has ever had to learn. To allow is the hardest verb I've had to learn. On Matthew's left shoulder, the crescent birthmark rested quiet, a small moon unclosed like an ellipsis between chapters. Aaliyah touched 2 fingers to her lips, lifted them skyward, the habit she couldn't unlearn. Hi, Dylan. Then she turned back to the present where a grandfather was learning to stay, a father was learning to be, and a house was learning to breathe steady. That night before lights out, Daniel said, that first day in the hospital you stilled a child in 5 minutes. Today you kept a man steady for 5 weeks. Same miracle called love with the right conditions. Aaliyah smiled. Every miracle needs homework. Tomorrow you read the story. Don't peek at the last page first. Exactly 2 years after the night Aaliyah knocked on that hospital door, Daniel told everyone to head inside for pizza. He had something to do. When Aaliyah stepped into the backyard, the string lights flicked on like a strip of house-made stars. By the fountain stood a wooden table, draped in white, low vases of white roses, and a velvet box lying still like a secret waiting to be opened. The autumn breeze stirred the wind chimes into a soft shimmer. Matthew peeked from behind the curtain, clutching his fox plush, giggling into his hands. Earl lingered farther back, pretending to be checking the spigot. Daniel walked toward her, his hands slightly trembling, the kind of tremor that had never shown even when presenting to 100 shareholders, yet surfaced with this one question that dried his throat. "You turned this place from a showroom into a home," he said, voice pitched just low enough not to be carried off by the wind. "You saved my son. You saved me. I don't want you to be my employee for one more minute." He knelt. Aaliyah Carter. He opened the box inside a slim band, a bright stone that didn't brag. "Will you marry me?" Instead of an immediate yes, as string-light scripts might dictate, Aaliyah stepped back half a pace. Not for lack of love, but because the old shadows rushed in. Who am I, a black maid without a degree? Who are you, a CEO in a world where decisions are made by spreadsheets? Will I drag you down or will you pull me up? And culture and skin color. And the rooms that only ever invited me in to serve trays, I'm afraid, she admitted, hand-pressed over the heart once broken. Afraid of being misplaced in your world. Afraid of being read as a charity case study. Afraid of losing my voice under the word wife. And afraid I'd be betraying the one who left if I get too happy. Daniel stood, refusing to let her monologue with fear alone. "I'm afraid too," he said. "Afraid you'll tire of learning the language of my world. Afraid I'll crush you without meaning to, with the habits of a man too used to being obeyed. Afraid the world will cheapen this marriage into a headline. But," he held out a thin folder, "I wrote a pledge not to bind you, but to bind myself." Aaliyah opened it, a prenup, but the title in bold read, Partnership Agreement. The pledge was level ground. Transparent finances. Aaliyah's autonomy preserved. Right to keep the name Carter or hyphenate. Right to pause and say no in any decision affecting her body work or culture. Juneteenth, a family holiday. Black church rituals and gospel not counted as noise. Daniel required to complete annual community-level CPR nursing for dads. A weekly 30-minute family council where everyone speaks, everyone listens, minutes handwritten and taped to the fridge. In case of divorce, he wrote it outright. Aaliyah holds primary decision rights for the child's upbringing with stability prioritized. Housing settled according to the child's security. "I've already signed," Daniel said, pointing to his name. "I'm not handing you a staircase and saying, 'Climb.' I'm building a ramp. And if you don't want to change your name, don't. I'm marrying a person, not a surname." The wind threaded lightly through the lights. Aaliyah stood still, hearing her heartbeat settle. Earl hissed softly between his teeth to hold back tears, turning aside to fuss with a screw on the spigot. "I have one condition," Aaliyah lifted her eyes. "Happiness is work, not outcome. Each day we repeat small acts that raise the house's temperature." "Done?" Daniel smiled. "Add it to tonight's family council." Aaliyah exhaled long, warm like surfacing on a riverbank. "Yes, Daniel." She extended her hand. He slipped the ring on, fitting snug like a sentence falling exactly in place. From behind the curtain, Matthew leapt out shouting, "Mama said yes," and clapped until his palms turned red. Earl stepped forward, handing Daniel an old lighter. "Skip the matches, light the candle." Daniel lit the small candle on the table. The string lights glowed in Aaliyah's eyes like dots of punctuation, finally resolved. That evening, Miss Whitaker emerged with a tin box she'd kept since youth inside a strip of pale blue ribbon. "If you'd like to tie it to your wedding bouquet," she said, voice husky. "When I married, I had no one to walk me down. I walked myself. I'm glad you won't be alone." Aaliyah took the ribbon, not just fabric, but history passed hand to hand. News of the engagement spread like wind. Mr. Collins, the golf talker, brought a bottle of sparkling juice because Aaliyah didn't drink, grinning, "I've reconsidered." Maybe the real West Lake Standard needs updating Stringlight's homemade cake reel family. Samantha from the agency sent an email. "Congratulations." No emoji, no envy, just polite, just distant. Late that night, before pulling the curtains, Daniel said, "Tomorrow the board meets. They'll ask why I lost New York, why I got engaged when the company needs FaceTime. I'll tell them the best face I have is at home with a long-term plan called family, and that's the only way my work goes long-term too." Aaliyah laughed. "Just don't lecture, tell a story." "What story?" "A knock at a hospital door. 5 minutes, calming a cry. 2 years, calming a house." They closed the curtains. The crescent moon hung outside, casting a pale strip across Matthew's sleeping shoulder, over the birthmark that lay quiet like an open parenthesis for what was to come. A backyard wedding, handwritten vows, a family photo under string lights. Aaliyah pressed 2 fingers to her lips, lifted them skyward, not to hold on to the one gone, but to remind the ones here that love is also study, learning to say yes, learning to set kind conditions, learning to stay every day. The wedding took place 6 months after the proposal, right in the backyard beneath the familiar oaks. The string lights flicked on early, the wind chimes tinkled softly. No planner, no gilded backdrop, just a wooden table. White linens, low vases of white roses, and Miss Whitaker's blue ribbon tied around the bouquet. Earl had adjusted the fountain so it sprayed higher than usual. Uncle Joe stood by the smoker laughing. The girl marries a CEO and still eats BBQ. Aaliyah smiled. "I'm marrying the man who knows how to tend the fire for his home." The guest list was small but right. Dr. Aaron Martin, Nurse Carol. A few colleagues who knew how to stop emailing after 6 p.m., kind neighbors, including Collins, holding a bottle of sparkling juice, a few friends from the black church, where Aaliyah still went to hear Sunday gospel. Samantha from the agency sent a card, "Congratulations," distant enough, polite enough, closing the chapter. Daniel wore a navy suit sharp as a right decision. Aaliyah, a simple white dress with a blue ribbon at her waist. Matthew, nearly 2, waddled down, clutching his fox plush, carrying the rings. Their vows were handwritten. Daniel: "I promise to repeat small acts that keep the house warm." Aaliyah: "I promise to name joy first before fear. I promise to stay when leaving seems easier." Together, weekly family council where everyone speaks, everyone is heard. When the pastor said softly, "You may kiss the string," light seemed to glow a notch brighter. Miss Whitaker dabbed her eyes, joking. "First time I've seen a family charter read at a wedding." Nurse Carol whispered to Dr. Martin. That day, 5 minutes made the baby stop crying. Today, they've got a lifetime. After the wedding, the house shifted rhythm for real. Every night, 8 to hours. Daddy reads 8:10. Mama sings 8:20. Listen to the wind. The HOA responded to Daniel's email string lights allowed if turned off before 10 p.m. Small wind chimes, toys cleared nightly. Daniel typed back, "Deal." Collins came by to hang a pinwheel on his porch, half joking, half serious. "I'm learning the new standard." At work, the board proposed Daniel relocate to New York for 6 months to bond with investors. Daniel countered with a plan, distributed leadership hybrid meetings, family hour policies for executives. One board member quipped, "What's next? Daycare in HQ." Daniel replied, "What's next is a company that lasts. People with families stay. ROI, check at quarter's end." He didn't pound the table. He told a story, a knock at a hospital door, 5 minutes calming a cry, 2 years calming a house. Strangely, the story landed because on the other side of that conference line were kids too. The next season, Aaliyah became pregnant. At the first ultrasound, Daniel gripped her hand so tight it was funny. The doctor turned the probe, the screen pulsed with a tiny thump-thump. Daniel laughed, crying. "If it's a girl," Hope Aliyah said first, no need to glance, to honor the one who set the intention for Matthew's name. And so each time we call her, we call a virtue. The second trimester seemed smooth until it wasn't one night Aliyah spotted light bleeding. Daniel froze 5 seconds, then snapped into drilled mode, call the OB, grab the go bag, hand Matthew to Earl, start the car. On the drive, Aliyah steadied him, palm on the dashboard. Breathe count 4. Daniel. At Austin General, Dr. Martin dropped by, not her attending physician now, but still a witness. No preterm scare, cervix stable, rest, and hydration prescribed. Back home, Daniel cleared his travel schedule, shifted meetings online, taped a new fridge note. Hydration 1 glass per hour. Ms. Whitaker reorganized chores so Aliyah wouldn't have to reach high. Earl sawed 1 centimeter off the kitchen chair legs so she could sit easier. Everyone adjusted around the small heart building its house inside her. Hope was born on a quiet Monday morning. No hemorrhage, no complications. Aliyah pressed her baby, skin to skin. Daniel kissed both foreheads. Matthew, now 3, stared solemnly and asked baby cry because no white noise. The room laughed. Nurse Carol said, "Because she's learning to breathe. In a moment, she'll hear the wind." From that day, the house ran on 2 parallel tracks. Matthew's Lego bricks, train sketches long, why questions. Hope's soft nursing sounds, gradually lengthening naps. The family council gained a new, tiny chair. On the fridge, Mom rest non-negotiable bold in Daniel's handwriting. Culture blended not as slogans, but in rhythm. Sundays, Aliyah brought the family to the black church for gospel. Miss Whitaker, who once said, "I'm not used to it," now arrived early to save seats. Friday nights, Daniel cooked Shabbat-style dinners, learned from a friend, but swapped candles for string lights, challah for cornbread. "Amen is enough," Aliyah teased. On Juneteenth, the whole family took off, read history comics to Matthew, sang Lift Every Voice and Sing. On Thanksgiving, Aliyah baked mac and cheese. Daniel roasted turkey. Earl made sweet potato pie. Collins brought non-alcoholic beer to match the vibe. Tension still visited. At a pre-K parent meeting, another parent asked bluntly, "You're the nanny." Aliyah smiled. "I'm the mother." Daniel stood beside her, offering no rescue, letting the 5 words stand complete. At home, they added to the family council. When asked nanny or mother, answer once, no further explanation, live the rest out loud. The board balked at family hour policies, but HR reported better retention, lower attrition. Daniel glanced at the numbers, smiled. Told you. ROI at quarter's end. He began mentoring a group of new dads at the company. They started a chat called Dads Who Read at 8 p.m., cover photo, a white noise icon. Earl kept practicing his staying punctual, calling if delayed, never asking. Some days, his blood pressure spiked. Aliyah made him check. Take his meds, lie down. Staying means staying with yourself. Too, Dad, she told him. He chuckled, closed his eyes, breathed steady, the kind of breath that became its own soundtrack. Miss Whitaker, after 30 years as housekeeper, announced retirement. At her farewell dinner, she laid the keys on the table, joking, "Time to give the house back to you." Aliyah hugged her, the embrace of 2 generations finally standing side by side. Stepping back, Whitaker looked at the lights chimes, toys neatly stacked at day's end, and murmured, "I once thought a beautiful house was one without traces." Turns out a real home is one with memories to trip over. She left, but returned sometimes with a new ribbon, a fresh pie, and always asked story time still at 8 so early. One night after Hope slept, Matthew sat on the steps. "Mommy, why my birthmark is a moon." Aliyah touched the crescent on his left shoulder. Because you're this house's porch light when it's dark, you remind us to switch on, Daniel added, and because some things stay open to let good come in. Matthew nodded, like someone who understood half but remembered all. Steady rhythm doesn't mean unchanging. It means elastic enough. This house had elasticity now, one end tied to habits of kindness, the other to acceptance of difference. Between those ends, hope breathed evenly. Matthew laughed loud. Earl tapped a rubber mallet. Daniel shut his laptop at 6 zeros. Aaliyah placed her palm on the smooth kitchen table and thought, "Once I entered this house as a guest. Now I belong." 10 years to the day since that knock at Austin General on a clear Saturday morning, the family dressed simply Daniel in a blue shirt, Aaliyah in a cream-white dress, 12-year-old Matthew awkwardly clutching his worn fox plush because it was ritual 6-year-old Hope in a yellow dress and Earl in his baseball cap. They carried a box of cupcakes and a card filled edge-to-edge with signatures. The automatic doors slid open, the familiar scent of antiseptic rolling out. Nurse Carol, long retired, was visiting that day. She spotted them and cried, "My goodness," wrapping Aaliyah in a hug. Dr. Martin walked over his smile, tired in the way doctors' smiles get, but still warm. "So, this is the loud little boy from back then," Matthew sniffed, feigning offense. "I'm not loud anymore," everyone laughed. Hope tugged on Aaliyah's dress and whispered, "This is where the wind started." Aaliyah nodded. "Yes." They stepped into the small conference room, the same one where Aaliyah once signed support person at the edge of a chair. Daniel set the cupcakes down, read the card aloud. "Thank you for trusting an embrace as much as medicine. Thank you for witnessing the first turn of our family's story. If you hadn't opened the door that day, we wouldn't have these 10 years. Doctor, Martin cleared his throat to hide the crack. Medicine has limits. The rest belongs to people's hearts. Nurse Carol added softly, and yours most of all. I'll never forget that hand. On their way out, they passed the old hallway. Somewhere a newborn cried. Hope paused listening like a small cat. Baby needs white noise. Matthew chuckled. Or Mama Aaliyah. Both Aaliyah answered. The whole family stood still for 3 seconds, a private ritual bowing their heads for cries past and for arms waiting still. Leaving the hospital, they drove to the cemetery to visit Dylan. Aaliyah laid down a sprig of moonflower and whispered, "Thank you for sending me signals." Earl placed his rough hand on her shoulder. "I've managed to stay 10 years. Aaliyah squeezed his hand. And I've allowed myself to be lighter 10 years. Back home, the backyard was the same string lights, the same chimes now, with Matthew's pull-up bar, and Hope's swing added. The family council had 4 voices now. Earl liked listening. On the fridge, the small things repeated chart had grown thick. 8 Yalrus. Daddy reads now, chapter books. Abaytantama sings sometimes, Hope drums on the table. 8:20. Listen to the wind. 1 full minute of silence. Sundays, church, plus gumbo. Juneteenth off, plus history comics. Wednesdays, Daniel off his phone by 6 p.m. sticker if on time. Fridays, movie night. Matthew, odd weeks. Hope, even weeks. One evening, the board invited Daniel to speak on sustainable leadership. He didn't lead with KPIs. He told a story of a black maid who knocked on a hospital door 5 minutes that steadied a child's breath and a man's. He closed, good policy begins in the posture of an embrace, not so tight it suffocates, not so loose it drops. Tight enough to steady, loose enough to grow. Afterward, a silver-haired partner shook his hand. I'll be home at 6 tonight. Collins, now truly a friend, dropped by with an old photo he'd once snapped at Matthew's first birthday, the boy tugging Aaliyah's necklace, saying, "Mama?" "I keep it in my office," he said, grinning. "Reminds me to update the standard." On a crystal-clear Texas weekend night, Hope begged to sleep outside in a tent. Matthew read to her under a flashlight. Earl retied the guy ropes, Daniel checked the generator habit since that blackout years ago, and Aaliyah spread blankets, cocoa in hand. The wind brushed through the chimes into a thin melody. The whole family went quiet for exactly 1 minute, 8:20, then burst into laughter for no reason. Aaliyah looked around the man who once trembled by a crib, now steady and gentle. The noisy boy now learning to be quiet at the right times. The little girl named Hope sucking cocoa through a straw. The father who once left now here on time and place, and herself once armed with nothing but hands and heart now holding an entire home. She turned to Daniel. "What day do we start over?" "Tomorrow morning," he answered. "Like every morning." "Then add it to the chart," Aaliyah said, picking up a marker and writing, "Begin again every day." On Matthew's left shoulder, the crescent birthmark lay still in open parenthesis. It whispered, "Not every story needs closing to be complete. Some are most beautiful in the present tense, like wind that never stops moving through." Night fell. White noise hummed, the chimes whispered. Before shutting the back door, Aaliyah pressed 2 fingers to her lips and lifted them skyward, not as plea, but as gratitude. Gratitude for that knock on the door. Gratitude for the staying. Gratitude that every day could begin again with small things repeated. From one knock at Austin General to a porch strung with lights and wind chimes, Matthew found arms Daniel learned to stay, and Aaliyah turned a showroom into a home, reminding us that happiness is woven from the small things we choose to repeat. Which moment touched you most in this story? The mama at the first birthday, Grandpa Earl's letter, or the proposal by the fountain? Tell me below in the comments if this story moved you. Hit like, share this video, and subscribe. Don't forget the bell so you don't miss the next one. Wishing you always find your own still wind at home.